Dance Your Heart on Fire podcast, episode number 22.
And we started dancing. I felt, of course, from the beginning that she's a beginner.
Mm-hmm.
But something, I don't know, I cannot explain to this day, something clicked with us. And we danced almost 30-40 minutes nonstop. I don't know.
Welcome to the Dance Your Heart on Fire podcast, the podcast dedicated to inspiring dancers worldwide whose hearts have been touched by music and dance. The universal language of dance and music is spoken by many of us throughout the world. We want to motivate the dancer in you by sharing stories, insights, and ideas to enhance your journey. Join us now with your host, Charles Ogar.
Hello everyone, this is Charles with the Dance Your Heart on Fire podcast, and today we have a special guest. Our special guest is Nemanja Sonero, who is a Kizomba instructor based out of Estonia currently, but originally from Serbia. I remember the very first time I saw Nemanja on Facebook was actually through some of the Kizomba tutorial videos that he has online through Mike's Kizomba, and he also has a lot of YouTube videos as well for tutorials for Kizomba, so we'll be sure to put that in the show notes to let you guys see that. But I'm really excited to have him here. He's been teaching Kizomba for a very long time. I'm excited to hear his perspective and his journey, and I think it'll help a lot of listeners give a different, shed a different light on the basics of Kizomba and the culture and things like that. And that's what this podcast is all about. We're definitely sharing the opinions and perspectives of a lot of different people to kind of help you guys realize what's out there and give you guys a little taste of what's going on, what seems so far away in European countries where they've been dancing Kizomba for quite a while now. How are you doing, Nemanja?
Good afternoon for you and good evening for us here.
Yes, I think the difference is 8 hours, I think.
Yeah, eight hours difference, yeah. Yeah, here in Estonia it's already, let me check, 9:40, yeah.
Awesome. Well, I definitely appreciate you taking some time after your Kizomba classes to talk with us. And I know we've been trying to get the schedule going for quite a while now, but with persistence, everything is possible, yes?
Yeah, of course. I apologize I couldn't meet before, but this summer I was almost not home at all. I was traveling nonstop, but I'm really happy to be, finally talking to you. So
yes, for sure. I appreciate you coming here as well. So I gave our audience a little bit of an intro, and obviously you know more about yourself than I knew about you. So go ahead and let our audience know a little bit about what you do today, and a little bit about your background, and then we'll dig a little deeper.
Well, today, I live in Estonia already for 4.5 years. And I'm based here, I teach here, and I organize a festival with my team here in Estonia. We have a festival in October. So it's been 4 years since I moved away from Serbia, where I was born, and since then it's been my new home and base for travels and everything I do. So I like it here. I really like it here.
All right. And how long have you been teaching Kizomba now?
Teaching, I think my first class I gave 2007 or 8, I'm not sure. It was, I think, 1-2 years more or less after the first time I actually started learning Kizomba, and since then, I didn't stop.
Okay, awesome. Before we get into the history of how you found Kizomba, what would you say initiated you or inspired you to start teaching at that particular time?
Well, teaching-wise, I teach already for, it's almost 15, 16 years since I teach dance. I started very young. I started learning capoeira as a teenager, and it's a martial arts mixed dance from Brazil. It's called Capoeira de Angola, Capoeira from Angola, and I started by accident teaching, actually, because my teacher had to leave the country because 1998 we had a war in Serbia, so he had to leave the country because he was not from Serbia. And after the war was finished, there was a few of us left from the group, from the original Capoeira group, and we just wanted to continue training. We wanted to continue doing what we do, but we didn't have a teacher, so let's say the best students from the group, the best students from the group, which was my friend Alexander and me, we just said, okay, we're just going to continue, and the only way we can continue doing this is to start a group. So I was not super happy I'm going to teach because I was young, I was 17, 18, but it actually kickstarted what I do today, which is teaching since then, full power, nonstop. So I learned to like it a lot, and it got me to where I am now.
That's amazing. I'm not sure if you've heard of Ronnie, but Ronnie is from Kurdistan, and his family actually immigrated from Kurdistan to Stockholm, Sweden, also because of a war, and they had to kind of flee their country and look for refuge in another country. So it's interesting how wars affect that. And then also, if you talk about the history of Angola and their civil war and how they won the independence, it's interesting how these things affect people in that particular time, and then as a result of that, it shifts and cultures merge and fuse and things like that. I'm pretty sure at the time it was a pretty difficult time. It's a sad time. It's not a happy time, you know? But then when you look back at it, it's like, look at how things were kind of quote unquote forced to happen because of those things, you know? It's interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I can speak from my experience. It was for me, especially in that period, because the war, exactly that one with NATO bombing, it was 3 months period lasting, so it was more or less we spent most of the time underground in the shelter. But I remember when we would actually go out during the daylight, when the sirens were signaling the attack was over, there was a few hours of breaks usually during the day. So I remember I would go out with my friends outside. I would just play capoeira on the street, or I would just dance for myself, and it was my way at least to, stay let's say, stay sane and to just have fun and to enjoy life even in those crazy moments. So dance definitely in many ways saved my life. So,
I'm glad to hear it. It's some of those perspectives that especially us here in the U.S. Don't have access to. So it's definitely awesome to hear your perspective, because it definitely gives an appreciation for what you guys have been through, and kind of gives just perspective, I guess, on the global occurrences. You're like, okay, there's people over there, and it's affecting people. But to sit down and talk with somebody and have something in common, and then this point, it's Kizomba with some of those people who were affected by those wars, is kind of awesome to hear, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I heard a little bit about Ronnie's story. I don't know all the details, but I know people come from different countries that I know they've been through similar situations. So dance definitely is a wonderful gift for us who've been through this. So yeah.
All right. So let's continue to go back in time a little bit, and let's talk about how you got started into dance. I know you mentioned the capoeira, and I think even in the pre-podcast talk, you mentioned that you danced a lot of other dances. So I'm curious to see how that all got started for you.
Well, let's officially more seriously. I started when I was, I think, 14, if I remember. Before that, I was mostly dancing for fun, nothing seriously. But I just started high school, and I was a really bad student because I didn't want to go to school. I just wanted to do my stuff, which was music and art, and just didn't like in general the whole school system. I just didn't find myself doing these things. So I started hanging out with some not so good kids, my neighborhood, and I was listening to a lot of hip hop, and I was doing a lot of stupid stuff back then.
Yeah, I hear
so
you.
so my brother saw what's happening, and he just said one day, I remember I ran away from school. I went to see him at work, and he just said, like, yo, like, let's go tonight to capoeira. And I was like, capoeira, what is that? He's like, yeah, he's like dancing and martial art is a mix. Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, maybe, okay. And then he convinced me. We went there, and I was very confused because when I came to the room, there was some music, there was instruments, people were singing, and then I thought it was some cult or something. And because it was new for me, especially in our culture, it was very strange. But I did that one class, and I don't know, I just fell in love with it, and it was, I believe, the best decision my brother could have made to, take me from the streets and to put my focus into something more constructive. So I thank him to this day, because if he might, if he didn't do that, I might not been, I wouldn't be here maybe. So this was my beginning with capoeira, and then after that I started, with years I started different martial arts also. I did a lot of, I started with jazz, I started with contemporary. 2003, I think I started first class. I went to salsa. I went to salsa class with one local Cuban teacher called Choma, and I started back then. That was actually my first contact with partner dancing.
So salsa was your first partner dance?
Yeah, it was salsa, bachata, Cuban son, done a little bit of danza, but mostly Cuban son. So these were like my basics in partner. Before that, it was all solo dances.
I was going to ask about that because part of, I guess, my research, just looking at partner dances in general, salsa, bachata, tango, kizomba, where did these all kind of start, And I was curious to see if there is any partner dancing just like quote unquote traditionally from Serbia. But I guess it was more all solo dancing at that time, yeah? Or was there any dancing in Serbia?
Yeah, of course. We have actually really rich dance tradition, especially in the traditional folk dances. And they're not really like in the form of a frame and a couple. Like we have certain moments, but it's mostly solo dancing or group dancing in a circle holding hands.
Okay.
And there's really a lot of different styles, different from different parts of the country.
Yeah.
But honestly, I was never too interested in learning them. So usually only on the weddings, if people, you just have some fun with your friends, they play music. So yeah, but I never studied or anything. I never did really any serious learning, unfortunately. One day maybe.
Okay, no problem. No, it's interesting because like just looking back at like dance and music historically, like the further you go back, the more dance was more like a ritual. It was for a ceremony or for a wedding or something important, and now dance is becoming something that's more leisurely, So that transition is interesting to see when things started to becoming, oh, well, I'm bored on a Friday night, let's go out dancing, versus, oh, my sister's getting married and I'm going to have to go do this dance thing to kind of celebrate people coming together,
Well, yeah, of course, I mean, the let's say the folk dances, especially for the young people, are usually not interested. And usually the new generation wants the new things that are trended and happening now. Because I was never interested in learning these dances and wearing all these traditional costumes. I mean, it was just not my thing. And of course, we're gonna turn to hip hop, to R&B, or to clubs, and it just fits for at least me back then.
Yeah, for sure. So I have another question that kind of sparked my curiosity. To hear you go from capoeira into contemporary and into jazz, those are definitely more dedicated dances, like that require a little bit more discipline to go to those, And capoeira, especially like coming off the streets, okay, you're a martial arts, so it's still considered more quote unquote macho, Okay, I'm not dancing, I'm really fighting and stuff like that. How did that transition go from capoeira to like, okay, let me take the dance part more seriously?
Well, capoeira in its form, it's a lot of things. It's martial arts, but originally how it was created, nowadays it's still a martial arts, but it's not the main focus anymore. It's so much about the movement itself, the dance, the music, the instruments, the songs, the culture, interacting with people. And as we say, it's not fighting, it's a game. It's an interaction of two people, question answer way of fighting, let's say. And for me, I was in love in the movement. It was so interesting for me to experiment with the possibilities of the body to move in this way or that way. And this was my first love, which was the movement itself. And so I was always curious to actually start other things and explore what are the possibilities of the body. And it was interesting for me to start a couple of dances because I saw it as something new. And I also wanted something new because I honestly have to admit I get really bored very, very fast. Like with things, you know, I get obsessed. If I start something new, I get super obsessed until I get really good at it, and then I'm like, okay, next. And I start something new, and this is my whole life. And I like it because I learn new things all the time. This really keeps me going. But back then, I saw salsa and I saw an opportunity to simply grow and to learn something new, to explore more of the movement in couple. And I liked, of course, there was girls there, and so you know, it was a time for me to focus also not only on dance. So this also helped.
Okay, awesome. So the key word of what you just said, which is really awesome, is you get bored easily. And that's actually going to be something that we're going to be talking about upcoming, because one of the videos, or one of the first videos that you put out on Facebook, was why some of the leads in Kizomba find the basics boring. And so we will definitely talk about that. But before we get into that subject, I would like to hear your story of how you found out about Kizomba.
Kizomba, even before Kizomba, I actually heard about Semba. Because I started 2003, if I'm not mistaken. Sometimes I mix the years really bad. I think I started salsa 2003, and I was actually, even before that, I was a DJ. Besides dancing and all these things, I was a reggae DJ for a long time.
A reggae DJ, nice.
Yeah, not a lot of people know this, but I started first when I was in high school, like house. I don't mean house music, but like DJ at homes and home parties. I started with that. I was using like cassette players, two of them, and then slowly later CDs, and then I was a big reggae fan. I still am, and one of my friends that was on the radio, he invited me to host a show because the old MC, he left. So I started DJing first on radio, which was a huge opportunity because I was really young.
Nice.
And so I was basically started DJing already back then. So when I came to salsa, I also started DJing, slowly salsa, bachata. And on these parties that we did, we had more and more people coming from the African embassies. And they would just join us because usually the people from the African embassy, they don't go to public places, public parties. So they just show up on private parties. And they liked our party because, it's Latin. It's some of it reminds them to, about their music. So they would also bring their music, and I remember, make me play a lot of different African music, so they would get around in a circle. They would just start dancing. And one of them was one guy from the Angolan embassy called Fula. And we actually got really close. We became good friends, and I remember, he said, "Hey, I have some really cool music. You just bring me some CDs. I'll burn some music for you." So I went to his house, and I remember he started playing like also videos, like CDs and videos from his country, from Angola. And it was, I don't know the artist, but I remember there was a guy in the front singing samba, and there was like 3 girls in the back dancing. And he said, "I'm gonna give you some samba music." And I said, "Samba?" He's like, "No, not samba, samba." And because I knew samba, and he was like, "No, in Angola it's samba, in Brazil it's samba." And he gave me a lot of this music, and I didn't know much about it, but this, let's say, was my musical introduction to that. It was, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, 2004 more or less.
Okay.
And I was watching the videos. I was copying the dance a little bit, but I never really learned much. Nothing serious. He also mentioned Kizomba, but again, like I said, I didn't knew anything more. And one of my first dance partners from Serbia, Jasna, she was traveling to Portugal 2006 or even before, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And we were dancing, we were teaching salsa together, bachata, blah, blah, blah. And she said, "Let's learn Kizomba." And I was like, I'm not so interested in it. And I also didn't know much about it. And she was very persistent, but I was also like, I don't know, I didn't like it much. So in the beginning, I was not a Kizomba fan. And then she started organizing some seminars and slowly bringing different people. And the first teacher she brought to Serbia was actually one of the first teachers who left Portugal to teach outside of Portugal, and his name was Benjamin Nande.
Okay, I haven't heard of him.
Well, he's not a lot of people know this, but he's actually the first who left Portugal to teach Kizomba, to like really spread it across Europe.
Benjamin
Nande.
Nande. Okay.
Yeah. And he first was, I think, 2005-06, he was in Poland, because Poland was one of the first countries in Europe after Portugal to start Kizomba. And then he came to Serbia, and then he started the workshops. And then I booked him for my congress that I organized back then. And then Jasna also brought Afro-Latin Connection, Ricardo and Paula. So the scene was growing. And that was also one of my beginnings for Kizomba. So yeah, this is how it started.
Awesome. So you mentioned that you didn't like Kizomba all that much at the beginning. So when did you, I guess, fall in love with Kizomba?
I didn't understand it. I really loved the music. But back then, in those days, Benjamin, for me, was my first class. Yes, maybe actually it was my first class. She was the first one who ever showed me anything about Kizomba. But let's say I didn't understand it much. I believe it's also because back then there was no real maybe system or good way to explain it. Because my mind was very analytical already and trained, and I was already a teacher, I was already a professional dancer, so I couldn't understand, I remember, the connection between the steps and the music. That was one of the most difficult things for me. The counting, especially the 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Back then they were counting 1, 2, 3, and I couldn't just connect. Why do you finish with this leg? Why would you continue? So maybe it was not, with all the respect, with Nande, I'm super thankful. But still, maybe he just didn't fit me back then, which is fine. And then later I found other teachers, and I slowly started actually understanding and connecting the dots in my head. Why is this like this? Because I just needed explanation a little bit, so I can get it.
Definitely.
And I slowly, let's say, I think I started understanding slowly back then. So, as you get to know someone better, love comes along.
Yeah, definitely. All right, awesome to hear that. Thanks for sharing that. I never heard of Benjamin's name before, and I've definitely heard of Ricardo and Paula, though. I got a chance to meet them a couple of times, so it's definitely awesome to hear how they've been spreading and kind of hearing and seeing the results of their efforts from back then into like more instructors that we have now,
Yeah, of course, it was there on, everything has a beginning. And just to mention quickly, Benjamin Ante after was also Ricardo Paul, and there was also Joao was coming.
Joao Rocha.
Yeah, Joao Rocha was also coming to Serbia, so they were one of the first people who started spreading it. And we are lucky that they did. So it's good for everyone.
Definitely. Awesome. So fast forward, now you're teaching Kizomba. Are you a full-time dance instructor now, or have you always been, or?
Full-time, yeah, not always. Of course, when I started teaching, it was, especially back then in Serbia, it was not profitable, and it was almost, I think, impossible to live out of that. So I was always doing some side jobs, and but full time, yeah, it's been already for, I'm not sure honestly, like 8 years, maybe more full time.
Awesome. For me, it's been a little over 2 years now. So it's awesome to kind of listen to people and hear their stories who've been at it for more years than I am. It's like, okay, I don't know, it just kind of gives a perspective. Okay, this is the track. There's people that have done this before you, and you're just kind of like walking down that track, even though I'm in a different continent, Well,
maybe for you guys, maybe in the States, I believe is a little bit, maybe if I could say, easier to live from dance. It's not easy for sure, but like I said, in Serbia, especially with all, in the 90s, we had 2 wars, embargo, inflation, and millions of things. Then beginning 2000, a lot of other economical issues. So we always had to do a side job. Like I had many jobs on the side just so I can support myself and so I can dance also, even though I was teaching. So yeah, luckily that changed. So now I can do it full time, and I really feel blessed and thankful for that.
Yes, that's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about your mindset and philosophy, if you will, when it comes to teaching Kizomba. You've been at it for 8 years. Some of the videos that you put out on Facebook are really insightful. I've shared a couple of videos myself, and it'll be awesome to kind of start to pick your brain in that regard. And we'll get into the importance and the culture of the basic steps,
Pick my brain, I like that. Yeah. So what do you first wish to know?
Your philosophy. So in the pre-chat that we're talking about, you mentioned the correlation of, like, in capoeira, they teach the language, they teach the instruments and things like that. And I think there's some overlap with the way that you use in your approach for teaching Kizomba.
Well, yeah. Like I said, I started with capoeira, so let's say the mindset of the teachers, especially in the form of capoeira that I do, let's say you can call it traditional or the original form, or it's very focused on giving the people the whole experience, which is the culture also, and the same mentality, the same philosophy. I'm really doing my best to apply to all the other dances that I teach, and so I really try my best to study all the dances to the fullest and all the details, so I can give that the same to the students. And capoeira is no different. I mean, for me, Kizomba is no different, and I see it the same way as any other dance, in a sense of there's a lot of information, there's a lot of details to be studied. Even after all these years of Kizomba, I still feel like a beginner in many ways. I don't see the end of knowledge. And I also feel lucky that I have my mentors who help me grow every day in it, and I also try to explore, of course. So, like I said, the capoeira mentality is that you come and you learn the words in Portuguese. They motivate you to learn Portuguese in general, so you understand the music. And a lot of the time, we listen to music, but we don't know what they're talking about. We don't know what is the core of it. So the music, to instruments, to everything. So the same for me in Kizomba. And I do this every class with my students. I teach them what is the musical style they dance to, why maybe this came from this style of music into the dance. For if it's capoeira, which dances influenced their passada, their kizomba. If it's from music from Angola, maybe this music connected to the dance, why, etc., etc. I think it's all important for everyone who wish to teach. If you, but this is my philosophy. Maybe some people say maybe I'm too strict, but maybe I am. But this is how I see things.
Let's take a quick moment to thank our sponsors. Have you been looking to level up your Kizomba, but you don't have the local instructors to take you there? Are you looking for something concrete to practice with your Kizomba partner? Or are you looking for Kizomba lessons that you can take on your schedule in the comfort of your home? If you answered yes to any of these questions, look no further. LearnToKiz.com is what you need. Progressive, step-by-step lessons that you can take at your pace in the comfort of your home or anywhere with a solid internet connection on your PC, Mac, or any smartphone. New videos are added every month. You can try this awesome resource out 30 days free at LearnToKiz.com/podcast. After the 30 days free, it's only a low $15 per month. But again, the special offer for the Dance Your Heart on Fire listeners, 30 days free at LearnToKiz.com/podcast. You won't find this offer anywhere else. LearnToKiz.com/podcast. And now back to our show.
No, it's a good perspective to have. I mean, if you're passionate about something, you're going to want to know more about it, And so along that discovery, even with myself doing some of these podcasts, it's like the more you find out, the more you realize you don't know, So it's kind of like, am I getting more knowledgeable, or am I just really starting to realize how much information is out there, And I mean, just knowledge in general, even outside the scope of dance, is just expensive,
Yeah, I usually say the more I know, the more I think I don't know anything.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about this first video where at least I'm not sure if it's the first one, but one of the first ones that you put out, where you asked the leads if they found the basic steps boring, and the majority of them said yes. And you asked the follows, the ladies, if they found the basic steps for Kizomba boring, and they said no. What inspired that question, and what did you do, especially after you asked that question to the guys? What was the home hitting point?
Well, this I usually ask. I mean, not every class, not everywhere, but there are certain specific classes that I do when I teach workshops locally or in the festivals, and we have a lot of leading and following workshops, and which usually the intention is to take people into, let's say, a world of connection, more focusing on the partner and the basics and the importance of basics and the beauty. For me, the basic step is really the most beautiful thing if you really focus on it. So I asked the students, because I saw a lot of confusion also in the class, and that specifically I asked exactly the leaders, like, is the basic step boring for you? Because the class that we had back then was simple walking. We were just walking across the room, forward and backwards. But like I said, certain exercises with the hands and the frames made them focus only on the partner and the basic step. It was not, they couldn't have other options, because usually, we always want to do millions of other things when we dance. And I asked them in the end the question. Some guys said, yeah, it's boring. And the girls, when I asked them the same, they said no. And it's good to ask people. This is also one of my, let's say, philosophies. I like to ask people, because if I tell them, they or understand and take, or they don't understand. But when you ask them something, it makes them think. Makes them question things. It makes them try to understand things from a different perspective. So I ask a lot of things usually to people, and I ask questions. And this is a good way to start a conversation.
Definitely. So, why do you feel that the leaders or some of the leaders find the basic step boring in Kizomba? What has been your experience, and what would be your advice to that person who finds the basic step boring for a leader?
That I think it depends on different things. One of the elements, of course, can be also how long does the person dance, because the beginner usually is focused, of course, on the basic things. As the beginner grows, as we say in dance, reaches puberty in dance. You know, in puberty, like in life, you want to try everything. You want to do everything. You want to go crazy, and you want to experience and show off. And you know, it's the same in dance. You want to do millions of things and to impress the lady. Until you reach a certain age and you realize that is not so important.
Yeah.
Like in life, yeah. So, like I said, I think people need to go through this process. I think people need to go through this dance puberty and to go through all this vocabulary of movements and combinations to get back full circle again to the basics. And our job as teachers is to take, you know, to help them go through that whole journey, navigate if possible, and to get them to understand that again what is important, to get back to the basics. For me, it is the most important thing, because in the clubs, I teach a lot of things. I teach advanced and even higher levels of technical and etc. But again, when I'm in the club, I do very minimalistic things with specific, maybe a little bit more advanced details. So, like I said, this is my way of seeing things, and this is my way of trying to get my students reach that level. And just, you know, we are. I believe we need to guide them, not tell them what to do.
Definitely. I like that word of guiding the students down the process, you know, and like you said before, the full circle of, okay, let them see what's out there, let them understand. And then it's almost like they hit a glass ceiling, if they will, you know, they see that they can't advance, so they're trying to do more advanced things and it doesn't work. And then it's like, oh, why? Well, why isn't this working? It's like, oh, it's because I don't have a solid foundation of my basic that's not making this easy, you know? So I think once they come to that realization, they come to that full circle, then it's like, this is what he was telling me to do from the beginning. I didn't listen at the beginning, but I mean, I almost feel it's necessary for them to kind of like go through it, you know? I feel like you said before, you can tell them and either they believe you or they're not going to believe you, you know?
Yeah. Well, honestly, from all the dances that I did, in every dance that I did, the basics, if we speak about the steps, is honestly the most difficult thing. And I studied also ballet and other things. It's truly the most complicated thing, and it really demands, I believe, a lifetime of work. And the basic changes for me. My Kizomba, for example, basics change. It changes every year. I feel it's different.
Yeah.
I feel it's progressing. I feel I'm researching. I feel I'm experimenting. I'm reacting differently to my partner, the music. Every year I see a progress, and this is what keeps me going. And I see myself in 50 years doing the same, like trying to figure out the way to improve it even more.
Definitely. I can definitely attest to that as well. I feel like in the past 6 months this year, it's like you enter like this new level of your basic steps, and you feel more grounded and like more aware of the energy coming from your partner. And it's really interesting because it's like, okay, this is the same step that I know from the beginning when I first learned Kizomba, but it just keeps getting more and more intricate, you know? Another thing that I wanted to mention as well was, and this is going back to the basic steps being boring to some of the leads and not boring to some of the ladies. And one of the things I was talking to you about even before we did the podcast was just mental capacity. When a leader is focused on the steps, they usually sacrifice listening to the music and they sacrifice paying attention or connecting with their partner. because all of their mental capacity is kind of focused on the steps and impressing and things like that, you know. But and the followers feel this. They're dancing with these guys, trying to do all the moves. They don't feel like they're being paid attention to. They feel ignored, or they just feel like a puppet, and they're just going through these moves that have no feeling, you know. But when the guy is focused on the basic steps, since those moves are quote unquote not as demanding mentally, they're still difficult. It still takes time to polish them, if you will, you know, but they do have more mental capacity to focus on their partner and focus on the music. And that is such a more connected dance, and it becomes more enjoyable for the follows.
Yeah, all this aspect. When I made this video, I remember I got a few comments from some people. I think they took a little bit too little what I said in the way of it's because I didn't mean that this is the only way to dance with someone, and it's and especially because I had also recently one student who asked me, which was a good question. He said, "Do you always you're a professional? You always have a great dance with a lady. You always connect?" And I said, "It's not true. It's I cannot." Yes, we focus on the basics, etc. So we want to connect with the partner, but it doesn't happen every time. It truly doesn't, and sometimes I feel it's someone I just met maybe, and I try to dance with them, but the connection is not there. It just doesn't work. So I have to switch somehow. I have to make the dance maybe or fun, or maybe in a different form, maybe interesting, or to figure out how to enjoy this dance, because I cannot. Maybe this connection is not it just doesn't work with everyone. So
yeah, it's interesting to hear you mention that, because I've talked about this with some of my friends, and I feel like each dancer kind of has their own frequency, if you will. And when you dance with somebody who matches your frequency, you can just do the simplest things, but you just feel really, really, really connected the whole time, you know? But if you're not matching the same frequency sometimes, then it doesn't connect, you know? And it can, sometimes you feel really super connected with a complete stranger sometimes, you know, versus dancing with somebody that you've known for years.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you this, one of my best dances that I remember to this day was in Finland, I think 3 years ago. I remember I was backstage. I was coming back it was around 3 a.m. I was coming back to the room to dance. There was only one lady available I saw. She was leaning back on the stage, and I came to her. I never saw her before, maybe on the workshop. I don't know her. I don't know the name. I just said, "Do you want to dance?" Yeah. And we started dancing. I felt, of course, from the beginning that she's a beginner. But something, I don't know, I cannot explain to this day, something clicked with us. And we danced almost 30, 40 minutes nonstop. I don't know. And she was a complete beginner, but the connection was there, and we focused on simple, very, very simple things. And that was to this day one of my best dances. And it just testifies how, like you said, frequency is important, and the connection. And I dance with one of the best dancers in the world. Like, I don't feel anything. Honestly, I have to be. It's normal. Like, I'm not gonna give names, of course, but like, you think, oh, now sometimes we think, oh, it's gonna be a great dance. No, I just finish. I'm like, like, okay.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So it just goes to show that it's not really about the skill. Sometimes it's about the mindset, or being open to connect with somebody, just finding that person and having that unseen energy, that frequency that you can't really see, but you can feel.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome, brother. So to close out the podcast here, I wanted to talk a little bit about your ideas on culture. We were talking a little bit before the podcast about the importance of the culture in Kizomba and things of that nature, and the importance of it, and how you were kind of viewing a lot of the, I guess, Kizomba scene, if you will, focusing a lot on the exterior appearance versus the connection of it. Can you kind of explain that a little bit more for our listeners?
Well, the Kizomba, when I started dancing Kizomba, let's say it was different than it is today. Kizomba has its form, as its original form, and which is also the culture. That is still the same, but people in the scene change a lot, which is also a good thing. I mean, we got so many good dancers and so many new events, etc., etc. But I believe some important things are kind of missing out. And I travel a lot, and I see it happening. And the global, the whole commercialization of Kizomba it has its pluses and minuses. And unfortunately, too many, I'm going to say it like this, too many newcomers, the teachers the last few years, are skipping the cultural part when teaching and when promoting this dance. Because, I mean, my opinion is that we cannot have this dance without the culture. It doesn't mean, first class someone comes and we just like, okay, now I have to learn the language, this, blah, blah, blah. No, we take it gradually, step by step, but we cannot skip it. And I'm not Angolan, I'm not African, but I grew up with Latin people, with African people. I grew up with these cultures, and I know how much it's important for them. How much is important for them that we, as let's say non-Angolans, non-Palops, it's how important it is for them that we do our best to understand and give people at least a piece of what they're trying to give to us. So even if it's learning the language, I believe that's also one of the most important things, learning the language. Because when you learn the language, you can actually communicate with these people. You can learn, you can give a lot more. So the culture part is missing out, and I think Kizomba will miss out in the future even more if we don't try to preserve this.
Yes, definitely. Hearing you talk just now reminds me of the podcast that I did with Quenda, who's a Cape Verdean Kizomba instructor. I'm pretty sure you've heard of him.
Yeah, of course.
We talked about the culture, and we talked about art, and dance being an art, and dance also being a reflection of the culture at the same time, and how those two worlds sometimes overlap, and sometimes it's kind of opposing views and perspectives, And we also talked about how culture it's a very interesting thing to kind of even try to trace the history of, just because there's so many influences from a lot of different places, Just like we were mentioning at the beginning of the podcast. I mean, sometimes it's war, sometimes it could be somebody just moving or immigrating, and cultures tend to fuse with one another, Cuba was a big help for Angola to win their independence. And so not only did they bring some military aid to Angola, but they also brought their music and their food and some of their culture as well. And it's not like a one-way street either. It's also a two-way street. And to try to trace the influences of all these different overlapping cultural fusions, if you will, is kind of tough to realize how intricate, I guess, if you wanted to call it a quilt of all these different threads of influences of culture. It's really expensive, and it's awesome to hear your perspective, because hearing more and more of that, it's just like, man, this really goes deep. It really does expand, and it's really expensive.
Yeah, it's true. But I believe it's expensive, but it's worth it.
Yes, it is.
It's worth it, and this is at least one of my missions in what I do, to do my best to learn more and to give that back to people and to the dance. And this, I mean, Kizomba gave us so much, and sometimes we forget how much that is. And I believe we owe Kizomba much more than what we're giving it now. And that's why I believe we need to preserve this, and for the next generation coming also.
No, I think it's important as well, especially, the fact that we have the technology that we have these podcasts, we have YouTube, we have Facebook and things like that, is easier for us to kind of document and put these things out there in a kind of a format and put that information out there for people to hear and understand and listen to and kind of open up their minds to how rich and how expensive the history behind a lot of these dances are, and not just Kizomba, but just partner dancing in general, You take a look at the history of salsa and there's some African influence. You take a look at the history of tango and there's some African influence. You take the history at the look of bachata and it's the same thing, So it's interesting how these dances kind of started in different places, and now we're at a point where we can kind of look at them individually and see some of the common threads between a lot of these partner dances, because like you said before, a lot of these traditional folk dances weren't partner dances. They were more solo dances and more, I guess, community-oriented ritual dances, if you will, for lack of a better word.
Well, yeah, and you mentioned, for example, tango. Tango is, even though some people don't want to admit, but it is the closest thing to Kizomba because it's a walking dance. Mm-hmm. Like Kizomba, tango is also a walking dance. It's a completely different feeling when you dance, a completely different music, completely different everything, but system-wise, technical-wise, if we analyze and break down the technique and the basics, there is a lot of similarities, especially as tango, the roots of tango are also a little bit from Angola. So what I would like, because I also dance tango, for example, what tango did, which I really wish for Kizomba, is that tango actually kept, and they were really fighting for that. They kept the culture. They kept, if you go to Milonga, the music is still from the 1930s. Like the music is from 1930s, 1940s. The social aspect of, men dressing up, respecting the lady, the way they dance, the basics is still the same. Yeah, tango changed a lot. There's a new stage tango. There's a lot of things, but still on a social aspect, in the clubs, let's say, it almost remained the same, and people really fought for the culture part to remain, and so the students will actually learn also that and accept and transfer that to the next generation. This is what I wish for, also for Kizomba to keep, because now, like I said, it's getting really commercial. It has its downside, which we just spoke about, and we need to figure out a way how to get back all this form, which I believe is, what we spoke. So I wish the same for Kizomba, what tango, went through, and they also went through the same fights and all these things. So in the end, I believe they won.
For sure. So at this time, Nemanja, and thank you for all the time and insights that you've given us so far, I would like to give you the opportunity to just kind of give any advice to the listeners that we have on the podcast from your perspective. And after you finish with that, I would like you to kind of let people know what's the best way to find out more about you online via Facebook or Instagram or whatever social media platforms you're using.
Insights on what exactly?
Kizomba, dance, life.
Yeah. Well, I always say enjoy the dance, like have fun, and we just spoke about the culture, respect the culture, of course, try to learn. I love hungry people. I love people one of the things that excites me the most is when I see, people who get very passionate about something, and whatever it is, if it's, paper making, playing, whatever. So I just learn more, be hungry, stay hungry, respect the culture, and have fun. Maybe this is one of the most important things. Enjoy, have fun.
Definitely. And what's some of the best ways for people to find you if they want to find out more about you and what you do?
Facebook, Nemanja Sonero. Also, there's a page of my dance partner Laura and me. Also on Facebook called Nemanja Laura. Also my YouTube channel, which we have all these instructional videos. It's also Nemanja Sonero. So basically anything with the same name online, you can find me. And we have also a festival in October in Estonia next month. So so we have a lot of artists coming from all over Europe, and so yeah, there's a lot of active things that I do. So yeah, if anyone wants to contact me, welcome.
Okay, awesome. Well, I will definitely include all of those links in the show notes. So if you're listening to this podcast, you can head over to the website and see the show notes there. You don't have to search. You can just go to the show notes and click on those things and find Nemanja. Nemanja, thank you so much for your time and your insights and your knowledge. I think it's important to get the stories of a lot of different Kizomba instructors out there, just to kind of share that perspective of a lot of different instructors, you know. And like you said, it's important to hear about the history and the culture and things like that to kind of, I guess, increase our appreciation for Kizomba, how it was back then and what we have today.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to the show. We finally found time and I'm happy we did. So yeah, all is good.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for checking out the Dance Your Heart on Fire podcast today. Be sure to check out neokizomba.com for links to everything that we chatted about today, as well as some awesome free resources to enhance your Kizomba journey.